Australia is at the center of a heated debate following the introduction of the new extradition bill, which could affect the lives of up to 880,000 people. Known as the Migration Change Bill, this regulation has sparked concerns regarding human rights, family separations, and the ethical issues of deporting individuals to third countries. The bill aims to address migration issues, but it significantly broadens the number of people who could potentially be impacted. One of the most concerning aspects is that it grants the Australian government the power to pay third countries to accept non-citizens earmarked for deportation. Critics argue that this raises serious moral and practical issues, particularly about how deported individuals will be treated and whether their rights will be respected. Michael Thomas, a senior official from the Department of Home Affairs, shared disturbing figures during a Senate inquiry. Among those potentially affected are individuals residing in Australia without valid visas, people on bridging visas, individuals currently in immigration detention, and those previously released following the High Court ruling on indefinite detention. This broad scope of the bill would impact more than 880,000 individuals, each with their own story, now facing an uncertain future. One of the most significant concerns raised by human rights advocates is the potential impact on families. Josephine Langbian, an associate legal director at the Human Rights Law Center, painted a bleak picture of how individuals could be separated from their families and sent into permanent exile in third countries against their will. What is even more troubling is the lack of clarity about which countries would accept these deportations, leaving individuals vulnerable to a range of dangers. They could be detained arbitrarily, denied medical care, or subjected to violence. Additionally, they might be sent back to their country of origin where they could face persecution or worse. These aren't hypothetical situations. There have been previous reports of abuse, neglect, and violence against deported individuals. Another critical aspect of the debate is the issue of the Refugee Convention. The bill does not require third countries to be signatories to the United Nations Refugee Convention, an international treaty that safeguards the rights of refugees and ensures they are not returned to countries where they face serious harm. Karina Portage, chair of the Law Chamber's Migration Committee, expressed concerns about this provision, explaining that it's often easier for countries to strike deals with nations that aren't bound by the Refugee Convention. This raises questions about the ethical standards of the countries Australia might partner with, and without adherence to the Refugee Convention, there is no guarantee that deported individuals will be treated humanely or offered essential protections. In an attempt to address concerns, Stephanie Cultivate, Secretary of the Department of Home Affairs, stated that Australia would not send individuals to countries where they are likely to face harm, in line with its non-refoulement obligations under international law. Non-refoulement is a principle in international law that prohibits the return of individuals to a country where they might face torture or ill treatment. However, critics argue that this reassurance is inadequate. The lack of transparency about which countries would be involved, coupled with the broad scope of the bill, leaves significant room for risk. The bill's proponents, including the Home Affairs Minister, emphasize that the legislation is designed to ensure community security. The government has framed the bill as a necessary measure to remove individuals who don't have valid visas, focusing on those who may pose a threat to public order. However, opponents argue that this narrative oversimplifies a complex issue. The vast majority of the 880,000 people identified by the Department of Home Affairs are not dangerous criminals. Many are asylum seekers, families, and individuals who have been living in Australia for years, contributing to their communities. While many individuals without valid visas have voluntarily returned to their home countries, the forced deportation of others raises serious ethical concerns. The High Court's ruling, declaring indefinite detention unlawful, was a key factor driving the introduction of this bill. The ruling led to the release of many individuals from immigration detention, including those on bridging visas. For some, this ruling was seen as a positive step toward more compassionate treatment of migrants in Australia. However, The government's response in introducing this new bill has dampened that optimism by shifting the focus to deportation. Critics argue that Australia is doubling down on a punitive approach rather than addressing the root causes of issues within its immigration system. This issue is not unique to Australia. Many countries are grappling with similar challenges around immigration, deportation, and human rights. In another country, a controversial plan to send asylum seekers to Rwanda faced significant backlash and legal challenges. Similar policies have been criticized in the United States and Europe. What sets Australia apart is the scale of the bill and its potential impact on a large number of lives. If enacted, it could set a precedent for other countries to follow or reject. The bill is still under review, and there are passionate arguments on both sides. Human rights advocates are calling for greater transparency and accountability in Australia's immigration policies. They argue that the government should focus on creating pathways to residency and citizenship for long-term visa holders and asylum seekers rather than relying on deportation. On the other hand, supporters of the bill argue that it is necessary to maintain the integrity of Australia's immigration system. They contend that individuals without valid visas have had ample time to regularize their status or leave the country voluntarily. The Senate inquiry has shed light on the potential consequences of this legislation, but the final decision rests with lawmakers. Will they prioritize community safety, as the government claims, or heed the warnings of human rights advocates? At its core, this debate is about more than policy. It's about people. Behind the numbers are real lives, families, and communities that will be profoundly affected by the decisions made in Canberra. As this issue unfolds, one thing is clear: the stakes couldn't be higher, and for the 880,000 people caught in this uncertain situation, the future remains unclear.